Should you run an LSD or a welded diff on your car? That's going to be the ultimate question for today's video. Now, after going through the experience of running both of these setups, I just wanted to share my 2 cents with you and think what you could do for your setup to really maximize it for whatever your goals are. Granted, this is just information that you can find on the internet as well. I am not the only person that's done some sort of diff setup, and it's very common, especially in the grassroots or enthusiast scene. Now, some setups are going to be more beneficial than others. I don't think that there's one end-all and be-all solution to all this, but I do think that from my experience, there's a lot of key insights that I would love to share with you guys. Now, the first thing is going to be, what is a differential? And the differential is really designed to send the power from the transmission back to the wheels. And in this case, we're just going to keep on the topic of rear-wheel drive cars, because I know we could talk about front-wheel drive LSDs. We can even talk about setups in all-wheel drive, but that's a huge rabbit hole, and maybe we could save that for another time. But as I've been going through my E36, I actually just recently upgraded to a LSD. And at one point in time, a long time ago, I used to run a welded diff on another E36 that I had way back in the day. Now, I think that there is a huge benefit if you wanted to be the most cost effective and you just wanted to get some seat time and slide the car. In particular, with the E36 chassis, this is a very popular one because the Nissan 240s are just becoming a little unreasonable when it comes to the pricing. This was like the cheap fun drift car for many years, and now people are slowly transitioning over to the E36 and the E46 because of the cost of entry is still pretty low. I don't know what that will look like in the next couple of years, but for now, you can still find them pretty decent examples, and you can make them into whatever you want. And I think a lot of people like these because of the 50-50 weight distribution makes them very balanced, and it's easy to modify them because it's just a huge aftermarket support for them. And it's pretty easy to do the diff. And this was something that Jacob and I went through pretty recently. So I think this will be a good definitive guide for anybody that has an E36 BMW, E46, or even E30, because they're all relatively similar, and being able to show you guys how to do it. So I'll show you what I got first in terms of the diff itself. This is a 3.15 limited slip differential. I believe this was out of a wrecked M3, but luckily I was able to get this from a friend of mine that was selling his car, and he just had this on the side. So I hit him up and I was like, dude, I want this thing. So I just had this refreshed and resealed over at Midnight Motorsports, just to kind of alleviate some of the headache of having to install this, because all I want to do is just have it in a place where I can put some gear oil in it. Jacob and I can throw it up on the lift just like we have it right now and put it in the car. So what you're going to be looking for when you have a limited slip differential like this is that you want to be making sure that both of these are turning in the same direction. So with the open differential, just like on this car over here, when you turn one wheel, it goes in the opposite direction. And the reason it does that is when you make a turn, usually the outside wheel is going to be turning at a different speed. So in this case, as you can see when we turn this, it's almost like a disco ball, but it essentially turns in a way so you can see that both sides are turning, and this will essentially give us the locking that we want. So we'd be able to lock this up so you can do some skids, take it out to Autocross, and all that fun stuff. So I'll show you guys real quick what the rear end looks like right now. Jacob and I got a little excited here, and we just actually took most of the bolts off, but I do think that this will be a great opportunity to at least show you guys what we're working with when it comes to putting all this stuff back in. So this is the original differential. Some of the first things that you're gonna notice is all of these axle bolts. So this is actually a Torx E12, and you really wanna make sure you have a really good socket for this side. And it's something that is essentially gonna come out. You really wanna make sure not to round these out. I mean, it just takes the slightest bit of just chunking these up, and you can run into a lot of issues here. But luckily these pop out pretty easily. We have the connector plug that I believe is for the speed sensor, which we took out. And there's like also a little attachment up here that holds this in place. And then on the other side, it's basically the same story, but it's a little bit tighter. I think if you're doing this on the ground, of course you want to take the wheels off, but in this case, since we're on a lift, it makes it so much easier. And then you have your two diff bolts up here, which are 18 millimeters. on both sides. These actually came out really easy. And one thing that you're also going to want to do too is this sway bar bracket right here is we loosen this so that we can essentially push this up so that we can gain access to these bolts. Because if you had it in the original position just like it is right now, you wouldn't have access to this. And on the E36 in particular, there's actually one last bolt, and it's right over here on the back side that we'll see right here. And as you can see, we pulled this out. And I mean, it's just amazing the condition of this because it's a car with 75,000 miles on it. Usually these bushings are completely gone. On the ears too of the diff, they're completely gone most of the time. But in this case, man, it actually went really smooth for us. And then actually the first one that you also want to mention right here too, and we used a lot of penetrating oil and we're super patient with this, is taking off the nuts that connect to the drive shaft. So on the E36, there's 4 mounting points here, but sometimes on the M cars, there's actually 6. So sometimes you have to swap those out. But luckily in this case, we don't have to worry about that too much. So now we're in the stage now where Jacob and I can essentially take off all these nuts and bolts, and we're gonna bring the transmission jack over and we'll slowly put this down and we're gonna put this back up. But I think just for the essence of time on our side, we'll probably just do a quick little time lapse of us just doing it, so you can stay focused on that. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below and maybe we can go into further detail just about this whole process. But for us, we got super lucky that it's been going super smooth for us, and fingers crossed that the install will go pretty quickly as well. So I think we'll just get our hands dirty and we'll hit the ground running. My only advice is if you were going to do this installation is that you want to be very mindful that the diff is pretty heavy, and if you're going to be doing this in your driveway versus on a lift. Now, I was pretty spoiled in the fact that we got to do this on a lift, and with my friend there to be able to help me with this, it helps a lot too and makes it go a lot smoother. But anyways, getting back to the subject of picking your diff. So usually with a lot of cars, they come with what's called an open diff. This is going to be the one where when you're taking a corner, most of the power is going to be sent to the inside so that it's going to be something that you can use every day. You wouldn't really notice it in most driving situations. But the only drawback is if you were to ever lose traction with one, typically it will only spin on one side, and that's what causes the open diff. Now with the limited slip differential, or what people call the LSD, is that you get locking in certain situations, and it gives you a lot more traction, and it's still usable, but it's going to be the most expensive setup out of all 3 of the lot. But with a welded diff, which is what a lot of people do, is this is actually designed so that you can just weld the spider gears together in the inside of the casing of the diff so that the wheels are constantly locked all the time. And some of the drawbacks with that is that you are constantly going to have chirping happening, and that's because of the power being sent to the wheels instead of being equalized so that when you're taking a corner, that the inside wheel will spin a little bit more and the outside will spin a little bit less, is that they're all going to be spinning at the same time. So you may be wondering why somebody would do that, because it sounds like you're ruining the car. But when it comes to drifting, it actually makes it very constant, which could be super helpful. So if you do like a lot of open drift events, I think one thing with the LSD is that it can feel a little unpredictable if you're trying to get the rear to lock up all the time. This will lead to probably more clutch kicking or just really getting behaviors behind what's happening. And especially too, if the breakaway torque is getting slowly worn down, maybe time to service your LSD from all of the drifting, whereas the welded diff can be found for really cheap. You can do it yourself. You can even pay a buddy 50 bucks. I mean, that's what we used to do way back in the day. There was a guy up at Lake Stevens. We'd just take it to him and he'd go weld your diff for 50 bucks. You bring him like 8 cans of brake clean to clean out the inside and the spider gears, and you're pretty much good to go.
Oh, okay. It broke loose, and then just, there's nothing that's yeah. And keep your eye on the cone. There you go, see? You're natural. Okay, do it the other way. Don't wear this side out, man.
do think that the drawbacks with the welded diff is that I wouldn't advise that it's like the safest situation. I don't know for most of you, but out here it rains very often. And you have to remember that since both wheels are locked up and they're spinning in the same direction, is that it's gonna be very hairy. You know, if you hydroplane on the highway, that's something you have to consider. But I don't think you're gonna actually feel that much of a difference once you're up to speed, but you feel most of the difference when you're in a parking lot. At very low speeds, parallel parking is just gonna be a little bit ridiculous, especially on a dry day. And people are gonna look at you like you're kind of insane. But the bang for buck there is really, really nice, especially if you're just gonna be doing this stuff casually for drifting. If it's just a fully dedicated car, I would probably err on the side of just running a welded diff all the time. But I do think that there is a lot to be said if you wanna do autocrossing. So for me, with this build, I definitely prioritize autocrossing. It's something that I do with my friends. We particularly do autocross and rallycross. But with the build that I currently have right now, I'm not really putting any focus on the intentions of taking it to rallycross. But I found that there is actually huge benefit going from open diff to LSD on the track when it comes to high-speed cornering. And I think one of the best things is that I feel like I have so much more traction off the line. And it's something you don't really think about. And I know that we can't really go into the margins of it, but I know that just from the raw experience of it is that I can definitely feel that there's a huge difference in terms of how much grip I'm having when coming to heavy cornering. Because if you're gonna run a welded diff, you might as well throw road racing and autocross and rallycross out of the equation because you're just gonna be sliding all over the place. It's definitely not the most beneficial setup for that, but I do think that there is a lot to be said about the maximizing of fun that you can have when running LSD in autocross, because you can still have the back end step out, but you are in so much more control of where everything is at. And I think this is gonna be the way to go for me going forward. Okay, so as you guys just saw, we got the LSD installed. There's no fluid in it just yet. We need to still tighten up the shaft bolts, so these are just kind of hanging loosely in here. But surprisingly for what it was, I mean, Jacob, that was super quick.
Yeah, that went by surprisingly well.
Oh, 100%. That went like lightning fast for us, but luckily Jacob was here to help me. I feel like if you're doing this on the ground, it may be a little bit of a struggle. This thing, even without fluid, is still pretty heavy.
Maybe use like a floor jack. I'd say put a floor jack underneath it. It might not be as bad.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. So yeah, if you have something that you can support it down here, you should be okay doing this on the ground. And now we got the diff bolt in, we got it both on the ears. So now we're in the stage of just tidying things up. We'll get a pump, put some gear fluid in this thing. And of course we gotta take it out. I think we'll take it for a little rip. But E36 diff, not too bad. I think for anybody that wants to tackle this, no matter what skill level, as long as you have a good set of tools, and especially you have a really good E12 socket. So it's gonna be this one. I think this is this a snap-on? Yeah, so this is a snap-on, you know, really high quality socket, because if you round any of these out, I mean, look at how chunked up these are. It's just, these luckily didn't give us any issues, but if you were to round one of these out, whoo, man, it would not be fun. It'd be very unfortunate. And I mean, my goodness, we could go into a whole rabbit hole about ratios, but let's just stay on topic for now. And he hooked me up and I got it for a silly price. It was like $150. And I actually took it down to Midnight Motorsport and I had them service the diff because I wanted them to the breakaway torque. Now, this is something that's a little bit out of my wheelhouse when it comes to the technicalities of pulling apart a diff and testing the breakaway torque, but they told me that it was actually very good. And when I put everything back together, I used Redline's 75W90 gear oil. This is kind of a golden standard, especially for the older BMWs. And I found that it just feels so good on the track. And I feel like I've got it really dialed in to a really good place right now. You know, I don't want to distract myself too much. And I think that a lot of what I'm going through with this car right now is just keeping up with the maintenance and making sure that it doesn't completely fall apart on me, because if you guys don't know, this was a car that sat in storage for over 10 years. So it's a very particular situation, but I do think that with the limited slip differential, this is my probably end-all be-all for the time being. I hope this was helpful for anybody that's going to be going through this situation of choosing what diff you want to run in your car. I would say bang for buck, you just want to slide, you have a drift missile, something you're just gonna get a lot of seat time in when it comes to drifting, absolutely go the Welded Diff. You will be super happy that you did. If you're just gonna be, putting around town, you wanna keep it stock, Open Diff is more than adequate, probably will last the longest out of all these setups. And then the LSD, it's gonna be a little bit more, and you're gonna have to do a little bit of upkeep because LSDs do get worn out as time goes on. But at the end of it, you can see it as a huge benefit in just being able to daily drive the car, and it just is much more manageable with the high-speed cornering stuff. And you can learn a lot from this setup, and you can really put down some really quick, fast lap times. And I was really surprised with the last Autocross event that I did with this car. Usually we're in some tastefully clad vehicles. I mean, you saw the Mazda 2, we've even taken that out, and it had rod knock. We still took it to Autocross. So I feel like I've just done the bottom of the barrel stuff, and now with this one I feel very fortunate that I can at least level up a little bit. But I do think that there is some conflicting information on the internet as to what you should run on your car. So I thought it would be kind of cool just to share my take on it, and hopefully this helps you guys out. But with that being said, I am heading to the shop right now, so I got a lot of things on my plate. So I got more videos to come. Anyways, really appreciate you guys. And if you want to join as a member or on my Patreon, I'll leave that link down below if you want to see some more exclusive content. Anyways, take care.